God help us. They are still out there. Those were the last words that my grandfather wrote in his diary. It was open on the table when he took his life. In 2019, it was me who found his body with a gunshot to the head, made with his old army pistol. I can still see the scene, the blood sliding down the edges of the desk, the metallic smell in the air. I don't think I'll ever forget it, but I don't write this, because after overcoming the pain that phrase began to generate in me, a disturbing curiosity. They are still out there, who or what was out there. My grandfather was always a quiet and reserved man who spoke little about his past. He served in the army of the USSR in his youth, and I always assumed that he kept silent because of the guilt of having been part of one of the cruelest regimes in history. After translating and reading his diary, I discovered that it was not like that, and that is what I came to tell. I know what he was hiding, and why he took his life in 2019. Everything is in the diary he wrote during his time in the army. The first few months he recounts are fairly ordinary. He talks mostly about his training and his first deployment. What is clear is that he was a patriot who had no problem obeying orders, a soldier who kept his mouth shut and followed instructions without question. That was probably what got him where he ended up 6 months after his training. He was transferred to a base in the Ural Mountains he had never heard of. And that is when things started to get strange. This is his story, September 2nd, 1958. This place is unlike any base I have ever been in. It is dug into the side of the mountains, almost completely hidden and hard to detect from the outside. We are not allowed to communicate with the outside world. The base is built on 5 underground levels that extend deep into the mountain. Each level is connected by a single tunnel with locks and security checkpoints without authorization. You cannot leave the level you are on. Our commander is a stern man called Sergei Yahontova. He speaks little and is very strict with discipline. I've only seen him once when I got here. He gave us our standing orders, which must be followed without exception. These orders make me think how strange this whole situation is. They seem ridiculous, but several men have already been punished for ignoring them. If any staff member acts confused or takes you to a secluded part of the base, sound the alarm immediately. You are authorized to use lethal force. If he does not desist, if you find yourself in a place you do not remember entering, sound the alarm immediately and drop to the ground, face down, with your hands on your head. But the strangest order is the last one. If you are on level 5 and the screaming stops, sound the alarm. Immediately you are authorized to use lethal force until you are relieved. I don't know what to think of this. I want to serve my country, but these orders fill me with a strange fear that I have never felt before. September 5th, 1958. Today, I made friends with another soldier who is stationed here. His name is Yuri Ivanovich, is a private like me. He seems to be very talkative and friendly, something rare among the soldiers at this base, and he was eager to chat when I told him I was new. We were talking about the strangeness of the place and the secrecy surrounding it when I worked up the courage to ask him about our purpose here, Yuri. I started carefully. Do you know anything about what this place really is? What is level C and those screams they mention in the orders? Yuri's smile disappeared. He leaned towards me. It's best not to ask about level 5, he said quietly. Nothing good comes of talking about that place. Keep your head down, and you might be lucky enough to never have to go down there. My skin crawled. Yuri used to be very friendly, but now he was serious. Is level CCO ever been sent there? No, thank God, he answered. But I know someone who, yes, what happened to him? I asked, realizing I was also whispering. Instinctively, he came back, but he was never the same. Yuri said sadly he changed since then, the fact that he came back. It's rare many soldiers who go to level C never come back. He told you what he saw. There was only one thing he told me. They've been there for 5 years. 5 years screaming in the caves. Yuri didn't want to tell me anything else, and he left me with more questions than answers. September 11th, 1958. Yesterday they sent us to patrol the surroundings of the base. The mountains around are a frozen wasteland, and I was freezing after a few minutes of being outside. Yuri was in our unit. He had recovered his good humor since our last talk, and seemed almost immune to the cold. Our orders were clear: if we found someone, we had to make sure they didn't come near the mountain. We had to stay hidden if possible. But if we saw any hikers approaching the base, we had authorization to use any method necessary to dissuade him. I hoped it wouldn't come to that alone. We saw a group of travelers, and luckily they were moving away from the base. We left, after making sure they posed no threat. Whatever it is we're protecting here is so dangerous that even the lives of Soviet citizens seem an acceptable price to keep it a secret. September 14th, 1958, today. Yuri introduced me to the soldier who was on level C. It was a coincidence that we're both assigned to the same guard post. Yuri, always so talkative, was quick to start a conversation to make the time pass faster. The other soldier's name is Ivan. He's a thin man with restless eyes that dart back and forth. He constantly speaks in a nervous whisper. Yuri wasn't lying. Whatever IV saw on level C has changed him forever. Yuri wouldn't let me talk to him about his time there. But honestly, I didn't want to either after seeing the mental state he was in. It would be cruel to remind him of anything so clearly traumatic. Yet after that meeting, I felt more uneasy about this place than before. Ivan kept mumbling to himself. He spoke in a low voice. But I managed to make out a sentence clearly. 5 years, 5 years, 5 years. He has been there in the dark for 5 years. The next few months pass. Without major incidents, my grandfather spends most of his time patrolling or on guard duty in different areas of the base. He is never sent to level C, and he never comes back to moan about that place. The next relevant entry is from mid-December, December 15th, 1958. I will never forget this day. We were on guard duty, controlling the staff, going from level 4 to level 3. It had been a long 5-hour shift, and we still had 3 more to go. It was almost midnight when things started to get out of control. Everything was quiet. The hallway was empty except for Yuri and me. When a man appeared, he was not a soldier, but a researcher. He was bald with glasses, and his face was round and red. He walked hunched over, dragging his feet, looking at the ground. I assumed he was exhausted after a long shift. Papers. Please, comrade. I asked him when he approached my post. He looked at me, and I immediately backed away. His eyes were red and bloodshot, moving them nervously from side to side, just like Ivan muttered something under his breath and tried to get past me. I stood in his way. He had not shown me any identification, and I couldn't let him through. Comrade, I need to see your authorization before I can leave. The level Q. The man looked at the ground again now that he was closer. I noticed that he was shaking, and he kept muttering something under his breath. I got closer to try to hear the best. "You can't get out. You can't get out. We left you there for 5 years, 5 years. I backed away a little, raising my gun. Yuri realized that something was not right and pointed his gun at the man's head. Comrade Yuri said loud and clear, "Please show us your authorization." The man looked at him with his eyes. "You've been on level Siako, soldier," he asked in a hoarse whisper. "Have you heard the trapped men scream?" "I need you to get down on the ground right now," I said, feeling the panic rising in me. No military training had prepared me to see one of our own act like that. Yuri circled around the man and positioned himself behind him. The researcher didn't seem to notice. His attention was totally focused on me. He stumbled forward, and with nerves on edge, I raised my gun, ready to shoot. "They'll never be able to get out," he said, in a trembling voice. "If there's any man trapped on level CCO, we'll get him out," I said, trying to sound calm, although my heart was pounding in my chest. The men muttered. The researcher then let out a strange laugh. No, the men are trapped, but they're not the ones who can never be freed. They're not alone in the caves." He looked me straight in the eyes. "They're the things in those caves that can never escape." He launched himself forward, running next to me. A shot rang out in the hallway. The researcher fell to the ground, his chest covered in blood. Commander Sergei Yahontova, standing behind Yuri, with a still smoking pistol in his hand. His face showed a barely contained fury. I went on alert, and Yuri did the same. "What is your first standing order?" Soldier asked, approaching us and looking directly at me. "Raise the alarm if any staff member appears disoriented or follows us. Sir, we are authorized to use lethal force if they do not obey." "Sir, and this man obeyed." Soldier did not. "Sir, then why did you not raise the alarm? Why were you still alive when I found you? Have you forgotten your orders? And that is not tolerated in this base. There is a punishment for disobedience." Soldier smiled cruelly. "Both will report to level CKO tomorrow at noon." I felt a chill run through me. Yuri stepped forward. "Permission to speak, sir, granted." "The fault was mine, sir. I told Comrade Mikhail Sidorov not to shoot. I acted. He was my rank, and I disobeyed standing orders. I was in shock. Yuri was lying, risking to protect me." He gave me a quick look and shook his head almost imperceptibly. I closed my mouth. "Then it was your fault?" asked Sergei. Slowly. "Yes, sir. Then you will report to Level C alone tomorrow. Now continue with your task. A cleaning team will arrive soon to take care of the body," and left. I looked at Yuri when Sergei could no longer hear us. "You're crazy. I'm responsible, too. You can't take all the blame. You know what happened to Ivan and that researcher on Level 5. You can't." "Calm down." Mikhail Yuri interrupted me. I noticed that he was trying to stay calm, even though it was hard for him. "There's no point in us both going down. If we can avoid it, I'll be fine. Don't worry. It can't be as bad as everyone says." He smiled ironically. "Besides, that way I'll be able to tell you what's down there when the rest of the guard shift comes back." It happened in silence. Yuri left to his bunk to rest before he has to report to Level 5. But I can't sleep. I can't stop thinking about what might be waiting down there and how my friend will get back, if he gets back. 6 December 1958. Yuri still hasn't returned from Level 5. It's almost midnight, and I haven't seen a trace of him. 17 December 1958. Still no sign of Yuri. I can't sleep. I lie awake for hours worrying about whether he's okay. 19 December 1958. Yuri still hasn't come back. What's going on down there? 20 December 1958. I couldn't take it anymore. When I finished my guard shift, I managed to catch up with Commander Yahontova at the officers' barracks. Permission to speak. Sir, my voice was rough with nerves. He looked at me with a curious indifference. He looked at my identification badge. Granted, Private Sidorov. Sir, my friend, Private Yuri Ivanovich, was sent to Level C 5 days ago. And I'm not. He's back. I'm worried about him being, and stared at his expressionless face. And what do you want from me, soldier? I want to know if Yuri is alive. Sir, if he is okay. I felt my mouth dry, and a lump in my throat, as Sergei looked at me with a contained rage behind his eyes. You know that talking about our work here is not advisable. Right, soldier. I had already gone too far to turn back. I could only continue. Yes, sir. Then listen carefully. Mel Sidorov, whether your friend is alive or not. It is not my business or our mission here. Our only job is to keep Level C safe. That's what we are here for, and I will send every man in this base to their deaths, if that ensures that task is accomplished. Sergei's voice rose higher and higher until he ended up screaming with saliva flying towards my face. Without realizing, I had touched on a subject that I should never have mentioned with him. Lord, I tried to apologize, but Sergei didn't let me finish. What is down there must never come to light. Understood? If your friend took his own life, from what he heard, it is a small price to pay. I didn't forget this. He turned and stormed off today. I think I made a grave mistake. December 21st, 1958. If I don't write in this diary again, it's because I've either committed suicide or changed so much. I can't remember enough to write this morning. We got our, as usual, guards, maintenance, or patrols, is all I've done since I've been here. But today was different. The officer started reading the duty list, mentioning names and assignments. For the first part of the day, I'm always at the bottom of the list, so I only paid attention when my shift was coming up. Turgenev Guard, Level 4, 0800. Guard Level 4800. Chernev Patrol 1. Suddenly he stopped just before he got to my name. He frowned and narrowed his eyes as if what he read surprised him. Then he spoke in a shaky voice. Sidorov report to Level 5 entry for December 21st is followed by several blank pages. This is what follows: unknown date, 1958. If you find this, please flee the mountain. You may not make it. But if you do take this journal to the army, command the KGB. Anyone who will listen to you, they need to know what happened here. My heart sank when I heard the order to go to Level 5. It took me a moment to process. The reality was slowly settling in my mind. Sergei had to be him. He remembered my question about Yuri's fate, and whether out of cruelty or some twisted sense of justice, he made sure that I shared my friend's fate, whatever it was. But I could do nothing. I headed to Level 5. Immediately, the tunnel guard on Level 4 reviewed my orders and smiled sadly at me. Wait a moment in the room next door. Son, I have to reconfirm all the Level C postings with command. It will just be a second. He gestured to a small unlit room before going to a phone on the wall and dial a number. I entered the room with resignation. The room was dark, only lit by a thin line of light coming from the hallway. The air was humid. Another person was waiting inside, standing silently in a corner, As I approached, his features became more visible. He looked familiar to me. Even in the dim light, he looked. "Yuri is you?" I asked, incredulously. "What are you doing here?" "Where have you been, my Mikhail?" he said. "Yuri." I looked at my friend, stunned in the few days we had been apart. He had changed in a terrifying way. Before he was a healthy man, always with a smile. Now his skin was yellowish, his expression gloomy, and his eyes were dull and cold. "Yes, Yuri, it's me. You're okay. You were discharged from level 5, have you been? I couldn't finish." Yuri lunged at me, pushing me against the wall with his forearm, pressing my neck. He put his face right in front of mine. "Where are you going, Mijil?" he whispered in a sharp voice. "You were sent to level." "Yes, Serge punished me for asking about you." Yuri let out a curse under his breath. "Curse, listen to me. Mel, don't listen to the screams. Whatever happens, come in. Don't listen to them if you can't stand it. Do whatever you have to do, but get out of there. Pretend to be sick. Insult an officer to get taken to the prisoner wing. Whatever, just get out." There was a cough at the door. The officer watched us, bewildered. "You have been cleared for level 5. Private Sidorov said, timidly. Yuri stepped away from me. "Remember what I told you." Then he faded from sight. "All right," Private asked. "The officer, is something wrong?" "No, sir," finally, with Yuri's warnings still echoing in my head. I was only talking to my friend. I walked past him and approached the thick iron door that separated level C. It slowly opened, revealing the room I was to guard, until I was relieved. And then the screams hit me. Applause. Music. Applause. I couldn't concentrate on anything else, but that sound filled everything, a cacophony of agony. The echo of several men being tortured more beyond the limits of flesh and bone. I was no stranger to the sounds of pain after my time in the army, but nothing compared to this. My eyes automatically went to the origin of the sound. It came from the back of the huge room I had entered. The wall was of solid rock, carved into the mountain itself. At the base, there was a small dark opening like the entrance to a cave, but it was blocked by rubble and stones, probably by a landslide that had closed it. I felt my head spinning and I leaned against the wall. I couldn't think, I couldn't focus on anything else but the heartbreaking screams, the echo of men suffering endless pain. It was as if I was drowning in the darkness of my mind, with nothing to hold on to. Don't listen to the screams. Yuri's words brought me out of that state. I took a breath and gathered my courage. The screams were still there, wearing down my sanity, but I fought them. I wasn't going to give in. Man in a lab coat passed by me, so I stood in his way. He was thin, bald, and had a few days' beard. "Comrade, what is that sound?" I asked, pointing towards the entrance of the cave. "Where does the man lead me?" He looked at me confused. "No, they have told you this is the first time I come to level 5. I know nothing about this place. Please, I need to know the researcher." Looked around, making sure no one was listening to us. And then he came closer, before there was a huge system of caves under this mountain. He whispered. The local people talked about strange noises coming out of there, and every now and then someone would disappear in the mountain, so we sent a small unit of 5 men to investigate the tunnels, what happened to them. Only one came out alive. They found him 3 days later, wandering around out of his mind, muttering things about the darkness. Blood and something under his skin when they sent another unit to the rest. They got here and found the collapse. It seems the man made a grenade explode to escape. causing the caves to collapse. And the men inside those who remained inside have not stopped screaming since then. It has been 5 years, without a second of silence. The man quickly walked away, not wanting to continue talking. I swallowed saliva and dry mouth, and a lump in my throat. "I am glad you came, soldier," said a voice next to me when I turned. I saw Commander Sergei Yahontova, a slight smile, but in his eyes shone the same anger as always, sir. "Yes, sir," I answered, saluting and clenching my jaw, waiting for orders, sir. Serge smiled. "There's not much to do here for the soldiers except wait and keep watch. You will stand guard at that post until you are relieved." He pointed to a small niche in the wall, barely big enough for a person to stand. "Sir." "Yes, sir," I answered, clenching my teeth as I headed to my post and got into position. The screams continued to pierce my ears and destroy my mind. There were no words or pause, not even for those screaming to breathe. I did not understand how the sound was so strong, if it was masters separated by a thick rock wall from these men, if they were men at all, but somehow it was drowning out everything else. I looked around, trying to distract myself. The room was huge, dozens of meters long and deep. There were other niches like mine along the walls, some occupied by soldiers with vacant stares, many others empty. The center of the room was filled with desks and sophisticated equipment, staffed by researchers and scientists. Almost all wore ear protectors to muffle the sound they worked with complicated electronic devices whose purpose I did not understand. Just in front of the sealed entrance to the cave was a large cannon mounted on wheels, ready to fire, aimed directly at the pile of rubble that separated us from whatever was there inside. Under its charge were 5 soldiers in uniforms unknown to me, all wearing heavy ear protection. We were expendable, not them, as my interest in the surroundings faded. The screams came back louder than before. I could not think about something else. And the more I listened, the more convinced I was that there was something inhuman in them, a sound that no human throat could produce. Whatever it was not quite human. Time began to lose meaning. How long I was there. Minutes, hours, days, I don't know. There was nothing to help me measure the passage of time, only the endless lament of the trapped men. Sometimes I regained consciousness without understanding what was happening or where I was. I just kept standing, leaning on the walls of my post. When I closed my eyes, I saw that terrible cave and the rock barrier that separated me from whatever was in there. I don't know how long I was on guard, until Yuri's words managed to break through the fog of my thoughts. "If you can't stand it anymore, do what you have to do, but get out of there." I wanted to serve my country. I would have given my life for it, without hesitation. But I couldn't stand this. I had to get out of that place. Before I slowly lost my mind, almost dramatically, I let myself fall on the ground. I closed my eyes and pretended to lose consciousness. Medical. Someone shouted, barely audible over the screams. I heard the sound of boots, as several men ran towards me and turned me over onto my back. I kept my eyes closed, pretending I was unconscious. "We have to get him to the medical wing," said a voice I didn't recognize. "He might go into shock. Not everyone can take this for long." I felt like arms were picking me up and starting to drag me. I expected they were taking me towards the exit of level CCO. Suddenly the movement stopped. It wasn't Sergei Yahontova's voice in front, between me and the exit. "Damn, sir, this man is unconscious. This place must have been too much for him. We have to take him to no, comrade." This man is here as punishment, and here he will stay until he wakes up. Take him to the prisoner's room and put him in a cell. He will be safe there until he wakes up if you want. Call a doctor to check him. But, sir, he is an order soldier. Understood, sir. They dragged me again. But this time, in another direction, panic invaded me. Not only would I still be on level 5, but I would be trapped in a cell, at the mercy of Commander Yahontova. If I woke up, he could guess that I was pretending. If the punishment for asking about Yuri was service on level 5, I didn't want to find out what would be next. They left me on a cold stone slab. An iron door slammed hard somewhere nearby. Then silence, only interrupted by the distant wailing of level Assaio. Time faded again. Minutes turned into hours. The only sound was the one coming from outside. Suddenly I woke up. It took me a second to realize what had broken my trance. The silence, an absolute silence. The screams had stopped. There was a second in which nothing was heard, as if the world was holding its breath. Then the sound of sirens and alarms resounded from the door of my cell. The echo of boots filled the halls as the soldiers took up positions. I jumped up and ran to the metal door, pounding on it with my fists. Let me out. Let me out, damn them. There was no answer. Then a scream was heard on the level CCO. The same inhuman scream I had heard before from inside the cave, but now it was closer, just outside. A shot was heard, then another, and then a whole burst. The ground shook when the huge cannon I had seen before fired once, only once. The screams increased in intensity as more men joined, but never more than a handful. A scream died down in a wet gurgle, only for another to take its place. I moved away from the door and fell to the ground with hands covering my ears. Something heavy hit the door. A red puddle began to spread below. Was heard a rumble of steel from outside, the agonized groan of the heavy doors being torn from their axis. The screams grew distant and spread throughout the facility, and silence fell upon level 5. I have been here ever since. I cannot open the cell door from the inside, from what I have been able to observe. Days have passed, thirst and hunger consume me, but I must resist in case someone comes to rescue me. I must warn them. I must tell them what happened on level C. December 29th, 1958. I was trapped in my cell for 5 days. Hunger and cold took their toll on me. I would have died of dehydration, but in a corner of my cell, there was a small, dirty toilet. After a day, thirst overcame my disgust, and I drank from it in desperation. The water lasted only 2 days, and thirst soon added itself to my list of torments. The lights went out after a few hours as whatever happened on the base above destroyed. The generators plunged me into darkness. I almost felt relieved, unable to see the dry red stain around the door. I was dying of hunger and cold. But my true enemy was my own mind. I could still hear the carnage outside, echoing in my head. The inhuman screams, the desperate gunshots, the sounds of an entire military base, unable to stop. Whatever had come out of that cave when I heard the sound in the hallway outside, I thought I was hallucinating. I hadn't heard anything but my own voice for days. I twisted on the floor and tried to ignore it, but then it came back. Slow, cautious footsteps echoed in the empty hallway. They were approaching, heading towards my cell. I jumped up, staggering. Where I thought the door was, something grabbed the heavy iron bar that locked it, and as I lifted it, it creaked loudly. The door swung open. A blinding light illuminated my eyes. I shrank back, and my illusions of resistance vanished in a torrent of terror. I curled up, raising my arms to shield my eyes. "Mikhail." Mel calmed down. "It's me." It was Yuri's voice. The light dimmed and I closed my eyes half to see where it was coming from. Yuri was at the entrance of the cell with one hand holding a flashlight and the other holding a gun. "Yuri, what are you doing here?" I thought that everyone was dead, Babel. Not everyone. It took so long. "Mikhail, I didn't know you were in the cell. I thought you had died, like almost everyone else. Sergei, that bastard, only told us yesterday that you were locked up here when everything happened. Water. You murmured they got dark." I fell to my knees. Yuri ran towards me and pulled a canteen from his belt. "Here, drink there, higher up." I took the canteen and opened it, suddenly drinking the water desperately. I wanted to thank Yuri and ask him 1,000 questions, but my body didn't let me. The darkness enveloped me, and I collapsed. It was 2 days ago when I woke up. I was in the mess hall on level 1. The survivors of what happened on level 5, about 50 soldiers in total, took shelter here. We have fire, food, and water. When I recovered, I asked Yuri what happened at the base. "We don't even know," he replied with a flash of fear on his face. One moment, everything was normal. The next people started screaming, "Me jail." Then they fell with their mouths bloodied, and someone else started. We tried to kill whoever was necessary, but it always happened to someone else. "What? How is it possible?" "I don't know, Mikhail." "No, it should be possible. And yet out of the 500 men on this base, now there are only 50 of us left alive. And we survived, only because we hid whatever killed those men. It seems, if it can't see you, you're safe, or at least safer. What happened when all those in sight died?" Yuri sighed. "The last 4 men who were taken by them didn't stop screaming. They ran into the wastelands. We haven't seen them again since then." We were silent for a moment. "What happened to Sergei?" I asked finally. Yuri smiled, and for a second a flash of his old attitude lit up his face. "He has been removed from his post. You could say when it was all over, he appeared unharmed and tried to make us follow the men who were screaming in the dark. We didn't allow it. He shot old man Lebedev before we could stop him. Where is he now? In the other mess hall on this level. He hasn't answered any questions about what the hell happened and remains silent. Most of the time, come with me. I'll take you to him." We made our way through the men lying and sitting around our makeshift shelter. Everyone was silent, and the loudest voice was barely a whisper. Although these men had survived the horrors of level 5, something inside them had broken. Sergei was lying in a corner of the second mess hall, with his hands and legs tied. When we approached, he smiled at us nonchalantly. "Soldier Sedorov, it seems that Hope Yuri rescuing you wasn't as absurd as I thought. You're lucky to still be alive, like you, Commander," I replied, containing my anger with effort. He could tell us what the hell is going on. "Those are state secrets, soldier. I can't tell them anything." Yuri snorted. "You already failed the Union, Sergei. Whatever it was we came to guard has escaped better. Tell us what it was, and maybe we can salvage something from this situation." The former commander looked at Yuri sadly. "I did what I could to ensure the safety of this facility. There was nothing more I could do." Yuri cursed furiously and spat on the ground in front of Sergei before turning around and walking away. I followed him. "What is our next step?" "Yuri," I asked him when I caught up to him. "We have to do something. We must contact the military command to alert them. We have to close the whole area as soon as possible. Come outside with me." Mel, I followed my friend, confused about what he intended as we walked through the deserted base and out into the cold night. I realized what he wanted me to see from somewhere in the darkness. A faint sound of screams reached my ears. They are still out there. Michael somewhere. We have sent out patrols to try to find them, or they return with no information, or they don't return at all. So what does that mean for us? We don't know where they are. We don't have the necessary equipment to make the journey back to civilization. In short, we are trapped. Here, January 2nd, 1959. We have remained camped out on the rest of the Level 1. Sergei has not yet said anything today. 3 men have not returned from the patrol. January 7th, 1959. 5 more men have disappeared since my last entry. There is still food, but we are running out of cigarettes. January 12th, 1959. 7 more men have died. Sergei is still not speaking among the survivors. There is rumor that he will be executed. January 19th, 1959. There is little reason to continue this diary, except to keep track of our losses. 12 more men have gone missing following the screams. Sergei has not spoken. In 3 days, the cigarettes are gone. January 25th, 1959. Today the screaming came closer than ever to our base, all the way to the ruined main gate. We stood clutching our rifles in terror, muttering prayers and curses. Thank God, they drifted off after half an hour, moving somewhere down the mountain. 4 men followed them, swearing to kill the screaming ones from afar. They have not returned. 28th January, 1959. Today Sergei finally spoke. It had been days since we had given him food and only offered him small amounts of water. He finally relented and agreed to talk to us. He never begged, never pleaded. He remains. Sergei, cold, proud, pragmatic. But now we know a little what we are facing. We have never opened the cave. Not once in C years, he told us with parched lips. The best scanning equipment in the entire Union was used to get some idea what was happening on the other side of the rockfall. Our best guess was that the 4 trapped men had been standing there for 5 years, their foot screaming, and no one tried to open it. Growled a soldier. They would have done it. We didn't know what was in there. What was in those soldiers, we still don't know even now. And how did they get out? I asked. The cave is still sealed. How could they escape? Your guesses are as good as mine. Private Sidorov. Sergei smiled with his head. Maybe they were gathering strength. Maybe they were biding their time. Maybe after Xiao years of doing nothing, they could pass through rock as easily as they pass through flesh. Whatever happened to the men in this base? It only happened to those in direct line of sight. With the screaming ones, said Yuri. Whatever way he moved out of the cave, it doesn't seem he can do it again. After all, that's how we all survived. Serge smiled at Yuri, hiding like cowards. Yuri reacted, fast as a snake. Serge threw his head back, blood gushing from his burst lip. Despite everything, he kept smiling. And what do you plan to do now, soldier? Ivanovic. Our only chance was to follow and kill those things, and instead you've turned on me. The soldiers around began to disperse with mutters of discontent. It was clear we would get no more from our former commander. Reluctantly, I gave him a canteen of water. It seems we will all die, here either. The screaming ones find us, or we die out there in the snow one by one. If whoever finds this diary, may God be with you, for he has abandoned us. January 30th, 1959. 5 more men have fallen. There are only 14 of us now, and Yuri is thankfully among them. Sergei still lives, having been moved to our mess hall to be better guarded. Music, February 1st, 1959. May God have mercy on my soul. The events of today will haunt me to the day I die. It was approaching nightfall when a patrol, the last 2 men brave enough to volunteer to search the mountain, entered cawing in our shelter. The sentries jumped up with their rifles raised, expecting trouble. There are people. There are people. On the mountain, shouted one of the scouts. I jumped up and ran towards them with Yuri behind me. Who? Where, I asked. On the slope. We counted 9. They are setting up camp as we speak. The remaining soldiers gathered around the patrol. Are they military? Asked Yuri. Could they have radios? Can we contact command? They are not civilians, it seems a hiking expedition, answered the patrolman. A dejected silence took hold of the room. Our hopes so quickly raised were crushed just as quickly. A single voice broke the silence. Sergei's bait. We looked at him confused. What are you talking about? Sonova asked one of the survivors. What do you mean bait those people on the mountain? Don't know. We are here, and that is why they have not come for us. But they will see those hikers. They will come for them, and that gives us an advantage. We know what they are going to do to the commander tied up. What do you propose? Even if they reach the hikers, we can't kill them without exposing ourselves. He's sitting on a military base full of weapons and explosives. Ivanovich outside. There's a mountain covered in snow. We go out. We prepare the slope with explosives. We hide and wait. When they come for the hikers, we wait for them to scream and we throw the slope at them on top. If the avalanche doesn't kill them, we'll finish them off before they know what hit them. Yuri was silent for a second. Let's suppose we do all this, he said at last. Let's suppose we manage to cause an avalanche, but things survive. How do we know we'll be able to kill them? We tried and failed when they broke free. Is this staying here, dying slowly, one by one? You choose. There was a second of silence. Then Yuri nodded. If we're going down, we'll go down, fighting around them. The survivors stood up and murmured in agreement, the fire in their eyes extinguished. For a month, it had been rekindled. They had hope. One more thing, added Sergei, raising his bound hands. Free me. Yuri hesitated a second, then stepped forward, pulled out his knife and cut the bonds of Sergei. Everything happened quickly after that. We collected explosives from arsenal grenades and demolition charges, and we went into the night. The hikers had set up their tent under the mountain from inside. It came a dim glow, the light of a lamp that illuminated it from within. The screams kept coming weakly in the air. Maybe the campers didn't hear them. Maybe they mistook them for the howling of the wind. Whatever it was, they stayed inside their tent. Our small group crawled up the mountain nervously in the darkness. Every movement in the black night was filled with terror. It only took a few minutes to place the explosives on the slopes above the tent. Once our trap was prepared, we moved away, stalking, taking cover in a grove 1 kilometer from the camp. And then we waited for several hours. We sat in the cold, frozen and terrified. Sergei held the detonator, having assumed command, thanks to his experience and some residual authority. It seemed like an eternity of waiting, but finally the moment we feared came. The screams of the wind were getting closer and closer to the tent. We saw it coming. 4 black stains on the white snow running down the mountain towards the hikers. There was a commotion in the tent. The shadows moved inside in panic, in unison. The voices of the wind fell silent. The running bodies fell lifeless on the snow, and 4 new screams arose from the camp. We froze. We had been anxiously waiting for this moment for hours, but when it finally came, we still doubted fly to the slope. "Make it gay," yelled Yuri, breaking our horrified trance. Our commander smiled cruelly and pressed the detonator. A loud crack was heard, and a bang like a thunder in the distance. A flash of flame lit up the hillside, turning black. It stopped. Then the whole slope above the tent began to move. The vibrations unleashed an unstoppable chain of movements. Tons of snow slid down, emitting an eerie groan. The mass gained speed and hit the tent with a horrible force. The silence fell on the mountain. Slowly we stood up. The tension was palpable. We waited, with bated breath. It worked, did I say? Finally, with a hoarse voice, no one answered for a second, listening attentively. Then Yuri whispered an answer. "I think so," he said, "we should go." Che, a terrifying scream, louder than any of the previous ones, pierced the night. My heart sank, a shiver ran down my spine. Yuri cursed, and Sergei pulled out his pistol. "It seems we are not done here yet. Soldiers, get ready the tent," and it split. As someone opened it, from inside the figures ran out, or towards our tree line. They didn't scream. They hadn't been caught. But my heart sank as the last 4 figures emerged from the ruined shelter. 4 loud screams echoed across the mountainside. The creatures staggered strength that gave them movement and energy. They weren't used to these new hosts, but they moved fast, following the fleeing hikers and heading straight for us. "Prepare to fire," he ordered Sergei, his voice cold as iron. "If he moves, kill him." My surviving companions knelt in the snow, with rifles aimed at the approaching figures. With a crack of gunfire, we fired our first volley. We aimed with all the skill we had, trying desperately to make sure the hikers who hadn't been caught yet didn't die in our crossfire. One of the screams fell, and I was glad only to curse in fear, as its scream of insane pain was raised by another of the hikers that they were running away. Were these invincible things? Death would only make them leap to a new target. Another volley made my ears ring, and 2 more bodies fell to the ground. Their screams were silenced only a second before a couple of the fleeing hikers stumbled and took up the agonized cry. Panic spread through our group like wildfire. Discipline collapsed. First 1, then 2. Soldiers turned and fled into the woods. Then we all ran with terror, seizing our minds. We ran through the midnight forest, with the screams of the creatures following us echoing around us. I screamed as the ground gave way, and I fell down a small slope. A stream ran below it, and I fell straight into it, icy tendrils immediately spreading through my body. My companions ran after me, some falling as I did, others staying on their feet. Sergei stood beside me, and I stood up. "What do we do?" I said desperately, panic threatening to overtake me again. Sergei had no time to respond. Over the edge of the slope we had fallen down, 4 shapes appeared. Their screams were deafening. The next moments are just a blur in my memory. I remember desperate gunfire as the 4 ravenous figures ran between us. Their screams mixed with our own screams of fear and confusion. Corruption spread quickly. Men fell dead. Others took up like glass in my mind. A screaming figure, a soldier I had known as Igor Penko, staggered towards me, mouth open in a disfiguring grimace. I staggered back. I tripped over a prone body and fell to the ground. I would have died. I should have died. But then Sergei jumped in front of me. He never freaked out. He may have been cruel, a bastard, and a murderer, but he never panicked as Penko screamed at Sergei. He aimed his gun and began firing his aim. It was flawless. 1 bullet, 2, 3. Almost an entire magazine was discharged into Penko's chest, all but one shot as the soldier fell to the ground, and the force that had moved his muscles fled in search of a new host. Sergei put the gun under his own jaw and fired. Then Yuri was lifting me up. Run, run, go back to base. I didn't question his order. I didn't ask. Why would we go back there? I fled with Yuri at my side as the screams tore through the rest of our group. We had escaped, but the creatures were quick to pursue us as we staggered. My legs burned, weakness and cold consumed my strength. I would have given up and lay down, waiting for death, if Yuri hadn't kept me standing. We rushed through the ruined gate of our former base, with the creatures about 100 meters behind us. The darkness in the ruins was total, and we would soon be lost if Yuri hadn't quickly found a flashlight. We ran down through the levels of the base, with the screams approaching from behind. If they saw us so close, it would be the end. Where are we going? Jade. With tears of fear and exhaustion falling down my face, we are trapped down here. Yuri's face was motionless. We can't kill them. Mikhail, he answered. If that avalanche and all the shots we gave them couldn't do it, I don't know what will. So what are we going to do? He looked at me for a second while we fled in the darkness. Then he raised his free hand in it, had 2 grenades. One of them opened the caves of the level ICO. I lure them inside and hide. When they have followed me, I run out. You have to be ready, Mikhail. As soon as I get out of the cave, you blow up the entrance. We will cause another fall of rocks. We will trap them again. I understood seal screws grenades to my chest, and I took it. With trembling hands, we entered level 5. The ground was strewn with corpses. The dead left after the escape of those who screamed lay piled around us. Our pursuers were not far away. I could hear the sound of their footsteps and their terrible screams. We were running out of time. Yuri ran to the pile of rubble that closed the caves. Hide quickly, he shouted. I jumped to the side of the room and hid behind an overturned work table. A corpse lay there with its eyes open in death, and a grimace of shock and pain etched on its face forever. A loud rumble shook the entire level as Yuri made his way into the caves. The walls groaned ominously, their structure damaged thousands of tons of rock, pressing down on us. The screams were getting closer. They were deafening. Yuri's light went out as he entered the cave. A thud was heard as he dropped it on the ground. The bait was ready. The screams of the creatures chasing us increased as they crashed into the level CCO. They did not stop, and I dived straight into the caverns following the light. I jumped from behind the table and ran towards the entrance of the cave. The pin of a grenade clinked on the floor as I pulled it out, gripping the safety lever in sweaty hands. I waited with my heart pounding and my breath coming in gasps. Desperation began to build inside me as I realized something must have gone horribly wrong. Yuri didn't come out. How long could I wait? How much time did I have left? Suddenly my friend's voice cut through the cacophony of pain, echoing in the dark cavern. Blow up the entrance. Mikhail, do it now, he shouted from the darkness. I couldn't. I wouldn't. I would. My friend was in there, and I couldn't condemn him to death. Yuri, I screamed desperately, I can't. My friend limped around a corner of the passage. 4 figures, jumped out behind him, all attention on Yuri. He hadn't been able to hide from them. We had run out of time. No options. Do it. Mikhail, you have to. He couldn't get any further. I saw one of the bodies chasing him collapse. Yuri writhed, staggered, and fell. Tears blinded me. I released the safety lever and hit again. There was a flash of light and a deafening boom. Screams were muffled. The walls shook, and the cave collapsed. Tons of rock fell shattering on the ground. A cloud of dust rose that burned my lungs. I looked through it with teary eyes. The cave was sealed. A rock wall had fallen at its entrance, blocking it, and I cried for my lost friend. This is the last entry in my grandfather's diary, except for the last words, "God help us." They're still out there. No mention of dead soldiers in the old investigations of 2000, the Dyatlov Pass Incident. I presume that whatever arm of the government sent my grandfather to that unknown base had arrived there first attracted by reports of missing hikers and made sure their involvement was never discovered. In 2019, the Russian government announced that it was opening a new investigation into the Dyatlov Pass Incident. The conclusion was that the accident was caused by an avalanche. I guess they are not entirely wrong or not lying, blatantly. I think it was this reminder of his past that pushed my grandfather over the edge, pushing memory repressed into his mind. I can't help but wonder if his last written words were true. Are they still in the caves? I wonder if somewhere in the frozen Russian wastes, buried under the Ural Mountains, 4 men, one of them a hero, and my grandfather's lost friend, still scream today.